Hey guys, tonight we slip back into a place you probably wouldn't last more than a few hours in. A medieval town alive with noise, smells, and far too many tiny, scurrying bodies. Picture yourself stepping through a creaking wooden gate, the cobblestones damp underfoot, a cool mist clinging to the air. Horses clop past, leaving gifts you don't want on your shoes, and the aroma of freshly baked bread drifts faintly, only to be quickly overpowered by the sour stench of refuse tossed from upstairs windows. You probably won't survive this week, but that's part of the fun. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now. I'm always curious to see how far this sleepy little community reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge into the narrowest lane of the town, walls leaning in as though conspiring to keep sunlight out. A puddle ripples with each step, though you'd rather not know what caused it. The first thing you notice isn't the bakery or the butcher's shop, but the rats. Sleek, quick shadows darting across the cobbles, whiskers twitching, eyes glinting like black beads. Historians still argue whether rats alone carried the deadliest plagues, or if their fleas deserve the bulk of the blame. But for now, you just see them as your unwelcome coworkers. The alley is alive with clatter. Coopers hammering barrels, a gossiping fishmonger scolding a customer, the faint chant of monks echoing down from a distant chapel. Here, in this compressed little world, you're expected to make yourself useful as a rat catcher. Not glamorous work, but in an age before pest control companies, people really did earn their bread, and sometimes lose it. By keeping the gnawing population in check, you pass by a wooden cart piled with onions, and sure enough, 3 rats leap from the heap as the seller throws up her arms in despair. She mutters about charms and curses, convinced that rodents are drawn not to crumbs, but to bad luck itself. A quirky belief lingers here. Some thought carrying dried herbs like tansy or rue would ward off vermin. Whether or not the rats agreed, they certainly didn't seem deterred. The ground is soft with straw, scattered to soak up waste, though the effect is more theatrical than useful. You nudge a stone with your boot and find a small, crude trap already set by another catcher. Nothing more than a tilted clay pot with bait. A reminder that you're not the only one in town, hoping to turn whiskers into coin. Your ears catch a chuckle from a passing child pointing at you with curiosity, whispering to her mother. Perhaps you look more like a fool than a hero right now. But then again, what's the difference when your job is chasing rodents through muck? You adjust your cloak, notice the drizzle soaking its hem, and keep moving deeper into the labyrinth. The city gates may have seemed lively, but here, in the tangled alleys, you realize that the rats truly rule. They dart out of sight, vanish into holes, reappear in bold defiance. Already you sense how this week will stretch you thin, both in patience and in cleanliness. Still, you carry on, because for now, this alley is your stage, and every scurrying body is part of the challenge ahead. At the end of this first stretch, you pause, listening to the hollow drip of rainwater from a broken gutter. Your work hasn't begun yet, but the town has already introduced itself. Noisy, filthy, crowded, alive. Tomorrow will be worse, but for tonight, you take a slow breath and let the faint rhythm of distant church bells guide your weary steps. And if you've made it this far, maybe take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It helps keep this little corner of sleepy history alive, and I promise the rats won't mind. You wake to the scrape of iron against wood, the faint echo of a market bell clanging somewhere beyond the rooftops. The town is already stirring. Peddlers haul carts stacked with goods. Apprentices stumble half asleep while carrying water. And you, still adjusting to the damp chill, are handed the simplest, strangest collection of tools you'll ever call a kit. This is your first day's gear as a medieval rat catcher, and it looks less like precision equipment and more like the clutter of someone's forgotten shed. Spread out on the rough planks of a workbench, a sack of clay pots with thin sticks to prop them up, a handful of wire nooses that look cruelly flimsy, and small pouches of powders that smell sharp, bitter, and vaguely like old garlic. A bearded guildsman gestures without much ceremony, as if to say, "That's all you get. Good luck." The simplicity of these implements would make a modern pest control worker laugh or cry. You pick up one clay pot and run your fingers over its rim, chipped and slightly damp. These pots were common household items, sometimes inverted with bait to trap a curious rat underneath. Effective? Only if you were lucky and patient. And patience in this job is as valuable as coin. You tie one of the wire nooses to a short stick. It looks like a child's toy, but it's meant to snap around a rodent's neck when set in the right passageway. Already, you're imagining yourself crawling on hands and knees, waiting for that telltale rustle. Next, the powders. That's where things get murkier. No one tells you exactly what's inside, but you're assured these mixtures can poison, repel, or at least confuse the little creatures. Historians still argue whether such early rat poisons were truly effective or more of a placebo comfort for the desperate. Recipes sometimes included ground glass, herbs, or even shavings of arsenic, if one had a grim connection. Today's pouch, though, seems more like a medieval mystery spice rack. You hesitate, wondering if this stuff would kill more people than rats. A fellow catcher leans in and mutters about secret methods. He swears by a mix of soot and flour. Apparently rats consume it, choke, and perish. It sounds unlikely, but so much of your role is balancing superstition with trial and error. You nod politely, though in your head, you suspect the rats are cleverer than half the townsfolk. The guildmaster insists you carry one more tool, a heavy wooden staff. Not exactly subtle, but apparently necessary when subtlety fails. Rats in groups can become startlingly bold, and the sight of one darting toward you demands quick reflexes. The staff feels reassuring in your hands, though also ridiculous, as if you're off to war with an enemy barely the length of your boot. Still, this is your life now. You bundle up your gear in a frayed cloth, tucking everything into a sling over your shoulder. The alley outside feels alive already. Rats skitter along gutters, while merchants mutter about their ruined stock. You catch the eye of a baker who shakes her fist at you, shouting about gnawed sacks of flour. You haven't even started, and already the town demands miracles. Here's your first historical fact to anchor you. In many medieval towns, rat catchers were officially recognized positions. They weren't glamorous, but they were part of the machinery that kept markets and storerooms functional. Rats weren't merely a nuisance. They threatened the grain reserves, which were the backbone of survival. Lose grain, and you invite famine. So, your simple kit of pots, powders, and sticks represents not just a job, but a fragile line of defense against hunger. And then comes the fringe tidbit, the one your modern mind might find absurd. Some medieval records mention using live ferrets tucked into sleeves, unleashed to chase rats from hiding places. Imagine it. You, in this very alley, releasing a ferret like a tiny assassin, watching it wriggle after its prey. While no ferrets await you today, the idea lingers in your head with strange charm. Maybe tomorrow you'll ask if the guild keeps any on hand. Your first assignment is small, but symbolic. Prepare your gear and test it near the butcher's shop. The butcher is already glaring at you, arms folded across a stained apron. He points with his knife toward a pile of bones, muttering about rats feasting openly even as customers pass by. He expects results. You kneel, setting a clay pot carefully over bait, a crust of bread laced with powder. You angle the stick, adjust the tilt, and step back. It's a waiting game now, and waiting in a medieval street is no gentle pastime. A child darts past, nearly knocking over your setup. A dog barks incessantly, as if announcing your amateur fumbling. A market crier bellows prices in your ear, and beneath it all, the scurrying. Always the scurrying. You hear claws against wood, tiny squeaks echoing like laughter at your efforts. You press the wire noose against the gap between wall and barrel, certain you've found a rat highway. The loop dangles, ready. Your staff rests nearby, though you hope not to use it in front of spectators. The butcher peers down, unimpressed. To him, you are either savior or clown, and the line is thin. Historians still argue whether early rat catchers were genuinely effective or simply tolerated as a hopeful measure. The truth may be that rats flourished regardless, their populations far too resilient for crude human tricks. Yet here you are, embodying that fragile attempt to impose control. And when the first whiskered face peeks out, you hold your breath, steadying your hands. The rat darts forward, sniffs the bait, and, miracle of miracles, triggers the pot. The clay falls with a clatter, trapping the creature inside. The butcher cheers louder than you expect, as though you've slain a dragon. You lift the pot carefully, the muffled squeaks inside reminding you that victory here is measured in heartbeats and shadows. The crowd disperses, muttering approval. You, on the other hand, are left with sweat on your brow, clay dust on your palms, and the realization that this is only day one. 1 rat down, 100 to go. You sling the pot onto your cart, feeling oddly triumphant and utterly exhausted at once. As evening creeps closer, you glance at your kit again. These strange, primitive tools will be your companions. Clay, wire, powder, wood, all humble, all flawed, yet somehow enough to write your small part in the town's story. The rats won't give up, but neither will you. Tomorrow, there will be markets to scour, taverns to sweep, and sewers to crawl. For now, though, you shoulder the sling and let the fading light guide you back through the twisting lanes. Ears always tuned to the whispers of tiny claws. And if you're still awake after following along with this slow start, maybe tap that like button and subscribe. It helps me keep sharing these long, sleepy stories, and I promise the history only gets more boring from here. The next morning arrives with a clammy mist hugging the ground, and you step out into the town square, where the bustle of the market begins to build. It is here that you will spend much of your day, creeping among stalls, keeping one wary eye on the goods and another on the skittering shadows beneath them. The market is the town's beating heart, its stage of color, noise, and human need. But beneath the canvas roofs and heaped baskets lies the quiet tyranny of rodents. You trudge between stalls, clutching your crude kit from yesterday, still damp with dew. A baker's table overflows with loaves, the scent almost sweet enough to make you forget the endless filth of the alleys. Yet as you near, you spot the truth. Gnawed corners, little holes, chewed through crusts, and the unmistakable pellets left behind. The baker scowls at you, jabbing a flour-dusted finger toward the sacks stacked in his stall. He expects you to catch the culprits before they nibble him out of business. Historians still argue whether medieval markets were ever fully safe from contamination, or whether people simply accepted a level of spoilage as natural. What is certain is that you are expected to stand between these merchants and disaster. You crouch by the sacks, setting one of your wire nooses just inside the folds where a rat might poke its nose. The trick is patience. You must act invisible, like part of the woodwork, while the rodents grow bold enough to creep into your trap. Above you, customers haggle with raised voices, bargaining over onions and wool. One woman insists her eggs are fresher than her neighbors, though the faint odor suggests otherwise. Beneath this cacophony, the rats are emboldened, sneaking beneath tables and weaving through the legs of sheep awaiting sale. From the corner of your eye, you spot movement. A rat, whiskers twitching, eyes reflecting the morning light, scurries boldly toward a discarded crust on the ground. You shift slightly, trying not to spook it, but a child barrels past you chasing a hoop, and the rat vanishes before your trap can do its work. You sigh, wiping your brow, knowing this will be a long morning. Mainstream fact time. Medieval markets were notorious for attracting vermin, not only because of food waste, but because they often lacked proper flooring. Dirt and straw beneath stalls provided the perfect nesting grounds. You can practically feel that reality now, the soft crunch of straw under your boots, hiding the tunnels of unseen colonies. You shift toward the fishmonger's stall, and the odor intensifies. Fish guts glisten in the sunlight, drawing not only cats, but a parade of rodents bold enough to nibble even as the monger slaps his wares on the counter. He notices you and snorts, muttering something about rat catchers never working fast enough. You smile weakly, kneel, and sprinkle a pinch of powder near the barrel, where tails flick in and out. The powder leaves a sharp tang in the air, almost peppery, and you hope it entices the creatures closer. As you work, you overhear gossip swirling around. One merchant whispers that rats can sense evil spirits, explaining why they infest certain stalls more than others. Another insists that they multiply faster when the moon is full. Quirky beliefs, yet common for the time. Some even thought rats were spontaneously generated from piles of straw or mud, crawling forth as if created from nothing. You shake your head at the absurdity, but you can't deny how many seem to appear from nowhere in these crowded lanes. At mid-morning, the first success of the day arrives. A rat, bold and curious, slips into the noose you left near the baker's sack. The wire tightens, and the creature thrashes briefly before falling still. The baker claps his hands in satisfaction, tossing you a stale roll as payment. It is hardly generous, but you tuck it away, knowing you may be hungry enough to thank him later. The market folk cheer more loudly than the catch deserves, their relief disproportionate to the single rodent. But in their eyes, each rat slain is a small victory against chaos. Your staff rests at your side, and you nearly forget it until necessity calls. A particularly brazen rat darts across the open square in full daylight, weaving between legs and startling chickens. You swing the staff clumsily, missing once, twice, before finally cornering it against a crate. The strike lands true, and while the crowd jeers at your clumsy effort, they still murmur approval. You bow with exaggerated grace, earning a ripple of laughter, because in this world, humor often softens the filth you endure. Historians still argue whether the presence of rat catchers genuinely controlled infestations or merely offered symbolic reassurance. The evidence suggests that despite all the traps, poisons, and staffs, rats thrived in medieval towns for centuries. Yet as you walk through the square, basket now rattling with your morning's collection, you realize that your role is less about perfection and more about ritual. People see you, and they believe someone is fighting back. That belief alone is valuable. The day stretches on, the sun rising higher and sweat trickling beneath your cloak. You pause at a stall selling cloth, where the merchant complains of holes chewed straight through his best wool. You kneel again, running your hand along the shredded fabric, imagining the tiny teeth that made such neat work of it. You set another trap, sprinkle more powder, and remind yourself that every little victory buys you another scrap of trust from the townsfolk. Still, fatigue gnaws at you. The air thickens with the smell of fish, cheese, and livestock, a pungent cocktail that makes your head swim. The clanging of the market bell, announcing midday, feels like both relief and torment. You lean on your staff, watching rats scatter in all directions as stalls empty briefly for prayers. The silence is almost beautiful, broken only by the soft patter of paws reclaiming the square for themselves. By the end of your shift, you've caught several more. The tally is unimpressive by any grand measure, but the baker nods approvingly. The fishmonger offers you a half smile, and even the cloth seller pays you in a scrap of fabric you might fashion into a rag. It isn't wealth, but it is survival. You feel the weight of the rats you've captured, their bodies tucked into sacks, and you know your work will never truly end. As twilight falls and the market quiets, you step back into the alleyways, weary yet oddly proud. Today, you've learned the rhythm of the square, the patience required, the mockery endured, the strange satisfaction in outsmarting a creature so small it's so clever. Tomorrow, your duties will take you into the taverns where shadows deepen, and rats share the floorboards with drunken revelry. For now, though, you let your boots scrape against the cobblestones, the fading chatter of merchants echoing behind you, and the endless whisper of claws, reminding you that the night belongs to them. If you're still here, still following this sleepy little tale through straw and shadows, it would mean a lot if you tapped like and subscribed. It helps keep these long journeys alive, even when the rats keep running circles around us. The sun sinks lower, and with it comes a new chapter of your labor. Evening is when the town's taverns begin to roar to life, lanterns glowing warm against the timbered walls, the smell of ale drifting through the lanes like a summons. And yet, where ale flows and bread is broken, crumbs fall, mugs topple, and rats come sniffing. Tonight, you carry your sack of tools into the boisterous heart of medieval hospitality, prepared not for feasts, but for furtive work in the shadows under benches. You push open the creaking tavern door, greeted at once by a wall of sound. Drunken laughter rattles the rafters, mugs slam against wooden tables, and a fiddler saws away at a tune that competes poorly with the roar of voices. The air is thick with smoke and the rich smell of roasted meat, a mixture pleasant at first, but cloying after only minutes. You edge along the wall, trying to remain inconspicuous, though already several patrons glance at you with curiosity or suspicion. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Taverns in the medieval world were not simply drinking halls, but essential centers of social life, serving as meeting places for tradesmen, travelers, and townsfolk alike. A single tavern might host a merchant striking a deal, a priest sneaking a cup too many, and a rat catcher crouched beneath the benches, all under the same smoky roof. You shuffle toward the far corner where the tavern keeper points, muttering about unwanted guests that have been bold enough to dart across the floor even as patrons dine. He wants results, but also discretion. Nobody enjoys knowing their alehouse is overrun with vermin, even if everyone secretly suspects it. You nod, ducking low, and pull your first clay pot from the sack. Under the benches, the world is different. It is dim, dusty, and alive with crumbs, spilled beer soaking into the floorboards. A rat darts past, nearly brushing your hand, as if mocking your late arrival. You steady yourself, tilt the pot with a stick, and scatter bait. Stale bread, softened in ale. The trick is not merely setting traps, but blending them with the tavern's chaos, ensuring no drunkard's boot tips them over before the rats find them. Patrons above stomp their feet to the fiddler's rhythm, and you joke silently to yourself that the rats might be better dancers than half these men. You watch the shadows, waiting for whiskers and tails. Your staff rests across your knees, ready if courage fails, and clumsy force becomes your only ally. You overhear a group of merchants debating loudly about the price of wool. One swears by Flanders cloth. Another insists local weaving is superior. Their arguments swell and crash like waves, but beneath the table, a tiny skirmish of your own begins. Two rats scurry toward the bread, noses twitching. They circle warily, drawn by scent, yet cautious of your presence. Slowly, one slips under the pot, and the stick wobbles. You hold your breath until it falls with a satisfying thud. A patron nearby cheers drunkenly, assuming your clumsy movement is a dance, and claps you on the back. You grin through the misunderstanding, content with your small victory. Now, for your quirky tidbit. Some medieval taverns genuinely kept cats as part of the staff, not for companionship, but as living pest control. There are records of innkeepers listing cats as assets in their accounts, much like barrels of ale. You glance around, half wishing for a feline partner tonight, but the only animals here are dogs curled near the hearth, too lazy to bother with rats. Hours pass slowly. Each time the fiddler pauses to drink, the room erupts with louder chatter, and in those moments of distraction, your traps do their work. A few rats captured, one dispatched with your staff, another startled into vanishing beneath the stairs. You become invisible in the eyes of most patrons, though one drunken man insists on telling you, repeatedly, that rats are omens of coming storms. Historians still argue whether medieval people genuinely tied weather predictions to rat behavior, but there's no doubt that superstition ran deep in every crevice of tavern talk. The tavern keeper eventually slides you a mug of watered-down ale and thanks, and you sip cautiously, knowing the less you drink, the sharper your eyes remain. Still, the warmth of it soothes your throat, dry from the smoke and dust. You wipe your mouth, lean back against the wall, and listen to the building's constant groan under the weight of bodies and laughter. As the night deepens, so too do the shadows. The fiddler's bow slows, his notes wobbling with weariness. Patrons slump forward on tables, their snores competing with the crackle of the hearth. This is when the rats grow boldest. You slide quietly to the hearthside, where scraps of meat bones lie in a heap. There, under the firelight's flicker, 3 small bodies scuttle. You approach, lowering your staff, setting another noose. With one swift movement, you snare a straggler, lifting it high, while another vanishes into darkness. Your arms ache. Your knees complain from crouching. But the tavern keeper nods approvingly, already planning to boast tomorrow of his cleaner floor. He presses a coin into your palm, heavier than you expect, perhaps a sign that he values peace of mind more than silver. You pocket it with relief, for your purse was dangerously light. The last task of the evening is less about skill and more about endurance. You sweep through the tavern's cellar, lantern in hand, the air colder and mustier than above. Barrels of ale line the walls, and you hear faint scratching within. You tap one barrel gently, and the sound ceases, as if the culprits know they've been discovered. You wedge a trap near the base and leave it, knowing the night will do the rest. At last, you climb back to the main hall, where the fire dies low and the fiddler snores in his chair. The tavern keeper waves you off with a weary smile. You step into the night air, lungs grateful for its freshness, though even here the scent of ale clings to your cloak. The moon is high, silvering the rooftops, and the town feels quieter now, though you know the rats still prowl unseen. You walk slowly, sack heavier than when you arrived, your boots echoing faintly on cobbles, slick with evening dew. The day has left you drained, but in a strange way satisfied. You've survived another round of mockery, sweat, and superstition, and earned a handful of coin for your trouble. Tomorrow, you are told, you will face the sewers, dark, winding arteries of the town, where rats breed in numbers that make taverns seem gentle. For now, though, you keep walking, letting the quiet night hum soothe you, eyes half closed, ears still tuned to the eternal scurrying. And if you've lasted through the smoke, the laughter, and the traps tonight, maybe tap like and subscribe. It helps me keep sharing these long, winding wanderings through history's quieter corners, even when the corners happen to be full of rats. Morning breaks with a gray sky that promises rain, and you are summoned not to the bright square or the smoky tavern, but to the place no one else wishes to tread, the sewers. You trudge through the narrowest lanes, boots already slick with muck, until you reach a heavy wooden hatch sunk into the earth. Two townsmen stand nearby, crossing themselves as though they were about to send you into battle. They mutter warnings of foul spirits below, though the only spirits you are likely to meet tonight are fumes rising from waste. You draw a slow breath, grip your staff, and push the hatch open. The air that greets you is damp, sour, and heavy enough to make you gag. Welcome to the bowels of the town, where the rats are lords. You descend the ladder, each rung slippery with moisture, until your boots splash into ankle-deep filth. The lantern you carry sputters, light quivering on the stone walls, slick with slime. Water drips steadily, echoing like distant footsteps. The passage stretches ahead, low-ceilinged and narrow, forcing you into a slow trudge. Here, you no longer feel like a worker among townsfolk, but more like an intruder in a world built for shadows. A squeak erupts to your left, followed by a dozen splashes. Eyes glint back at you, dozens of them, watching from ledges and holes. Historians still argue whether medieval sewer systems were sophisticated enough to provide real sanitation, or merely acted as glorified cesspits. What is certain is that they were perfect breeding grounds for vermin. The damp, the darkness, the endless flow of scraps and filth, all combined to create paradise for rats, misery for you. You set your first trap on a stone ledge where the filth has collected scraps of bread. The clay pot trembles slightly as you position it, and for a moment you wonder whether the rats below are laughing. You sprinkle a pinch of powder, though the air is already so noxious that it seems pointless. Your noose dangles just above the water, a crude little threat against a tide of clever whiskers. The deeper you trudge, the louder the sounds become. Constant splashes, scurries, the high-pitched squeals of creatures jostling in their hidden warrens. You joke silently that it is like attending a secret rat opera, the chorus rehearsing just for you. The humor barely masks your unease. Every corner hides movement. Every shadow threatens to dart forward. Still, you steady your lantern, push forward, and remind yourself that the townsfolk above are depending on you, though none would willingly trade places. Here is your mainstream fact of the section. Rats thrived in medieval Europe partly because waste management was crude at best. Towns often dumped refuse into rivers or open ditches, and only wealthier centers developed underground channels like the one you slog through now. These channels might have been designed to carry away stormwater, but they quickly became clogged with waste, creating a perfect storm of stench and infestation. You crouch by a side channel, noticing gnawed bones scattered in a heap. The sight unsettles you, though you try to imagine they came from discarded meals rather than something more sinister. A quirky tidbit drifts into your memory. Some chroniclers claimed that rats could grow as large as small dogs when left unchecked in sewers. Whether truth or exaggeration, the idea makes you glance nervously at every shadow, half expecting some oversized whiskered beast to emerge. You hear it then, a sudden rush of movement, water splashing violently as a horde scatters. One bold rat remains, darting toward your trap with reckless speed. You barely have time to react before the clay pot falls, capturing it. You lift the pot gingerly, its weight rocking, and tuck it into your sack. One success, though surrounded by countless more. You laugh softly at the futility. For every rat you catch, 20 more dance, just out of reach. Your staff proves useful soon after. A pair of rats climb a ladder rung ahead of you, bold as soldiers on patrol. You swing once, twice, knocking them into the water below. The splash echoes down the tunnel, startling even more into fleeing. You mutter that at least you're providing entertainment, a lone actor in this subterranean theater. The lantern sputters again, threatening to die. You shake it gently, praying the oil lasts long enough. Without light, you would be swallowed whole by the darkness. You kneel, reset your traps, sprinkle more powder, and wipe sweat from your brow. The air is thick, clinging to your lungs, each breath a reminder of why this job pays in coin and not gratitude. Historians still argue whether rat catchers in such conditions could have made any measurable difference, or whether the sheer volume of infestation rendered their work symbolic. Perhaps your presence here tonight is more ritual than reality, a sign to the townsfolk that someone dares face the filth on their behalf. That thought comforts you, however faintly, as you place one final trap near a drainage grate. The noises never cease. High-pitched squeals rise and fall, mingling with the drip of water and the steady hum of unseen movement. It feels less like hunting and more like being surrounded by an enemy army, one too numerous to fight. You adjust your cloak, shiver against the damp, and trudge back toward the ladder. Sack heavier, mood darker, yet oddly steady. You are learning to endure, if not to conquer. Climbing out, the cool night air greets you like a blessing. You collapse onto the cobblestones, wiping grime from your boots, lantern nearly spent. The townsmen waiting above gape at your filth-streaked face and laugh nervously, handing you a token coin for your troubles. They do not dare ask what horrors lie beneath. You shoulder your sack, nod without words, and move on. The town is quieter now. Windows glow with candlelight, doors creak shut, and distant bells mark the evening hour. You walk slowly, body aching, but a strange pride lingers. Few will ever know what you faced below, and fewer still would envy you. But you carry the knowledge like a badge. Tomorrow will bring new summons, perhaps to the castle, perhaps to farms beyond the gate. But for tonight, you let the cool wind wash away the stench clinging to you, step by weary step. And if you've trudged with me this far through muck and shadows, maybe take a second to like the video and subscribe. It helps me keep spinning out these long, slow stories. even in the darkest corners, where the only applause comes from squeaks in the dark. The following day dawns with a pale wash of light slipping through the narrow streets, and you hardly have time to shake the sewer stench from your cloak before new orders arrive. A messenger boy, barefoot and breathless, shouts your name and delivers a summons you hadn't expected. The castle wants you. Your tools feel suddenly smaller, less impressive, as you imagine striding into noble halls where every gesture is measured. Still, coin is coin, and a rat in a royal pantry is no less whiskered than one in a fish stall. You trudge uphill, past the twisting alleys, boots echoing on stone as the houses give way to wider lanes. The castle towers above, its walls thick, its gates looming. You pass under the portcullis, guarded by men with halberds, who eye you as if you're some oddity dragged in from the mud. One mutters that the castle has grown desperate indeed if rat catchers are welcome within. You smile faintly, trying not to let your nerves show. Inside, the air is different, cooler, less perfumed faintly by rushes scattered on the floor. Yet even here, the faint scratching of claws betrays the truth. The rats have breached noble walls. Historians still argue whether medieval castles truly provided refuge from pests, or whether their storage rooms, with stacked grain and hidden corners, simply offered luxury accommodations for rodents. Judging from the anxious looks of servants scurrying about, you'd wager on the latter. You're led into a great hall, its beams blackened with age, banners fluttering slightly in a draught. At the far end, a steward waits, robes trailing, expression severe. He informs you that rats have been seen in the pantry, nibbling dried meats, and, worse, invading the flour sacks reserved for the Lord's feasts. The cook is near hysterical, threatening to resign if the problem isn't resolved. You nod respectfully, though inwardly you wonder how long your crude pots and wires will hold up in a chamber designed to host banquets. The pantry is cavernous, lined with shelves of bread, wheels of cheese, and salted hams dangling overhead. The smell is rich, almost dizzying, but your attention is drawn to a half-chewed loaf lying conspicuously near the center. The rats haven't even bothered to hide their crime. You kneel, setting one clay pot carefully near the gnawed bread, sprinkling powder with practiced motions. Your wire nooses you place along the base of the shelves, imagining tiny whiskered snouts poking out to investigate. A servant girl watches nervously, clutching her apron. She whispers that the Lord himself is furious, convinced the rats are a bad omen before an upcoming feast. Here's your quirky tidbit of the section. In some traditions, rats were believed to predict disaster in noble households, deserting castles before sieges or plagues. Some chroniclers even claimed they fled ships before storms, as though gifted with supernatural foresight. Whether true or not, your noble employer clearly subscribes to such fears. You wait in the pantry, staff resting at your side, as the hall outside fills with voices. A scribe passes, muttering about tax rolls. A guard sneezes loudly, startling the servant girl. Beneath it all, faint squeaks begin to rise, bold in the dim silence of the pantry. You hold your breath as one whiskered face appears at the flour sack's corner. Slowly, cautiously, the creature creeps forward, enticed by crumbs. It slips under your pot. Thud! The trap closes, echoing slightly in the cavernous space. The servant gasps in delight, clapping her hands. But the victory is short-lived. Another rat, bolder still, scurries directly across the open floor toward a dangling ham. Without thinking, you swing your staff, catching it mid-dash, The blow resounds louder than you'd intended, and for a moment you fear the entire hall has heard. From the doorway, the cook bursts in, eyes wide. Yet instead of scolding, he praises you, declaring the pantry safe again. For now. Historians still argue whether castle kitchens ever truly achieved cleanliness, or if rats were simply an accepted nuisance. Certainly, the sheer abundance of food made them irresistible. Tonight, you've proven useful, though you know the victory is fragile. The steward returns, weighing your sack and nodding at the evidence. He grants you more coin than you've yet earned, slipping the silver into your palm with a gravity that makes you stand taller. The castle, it seems, respects the rat catcher when their own comfort is threatened. For a fleeting moment, you feel almost noble yourself, though the filth on your cloak betrays the truth. As you depart, the torches flicker against stone, and the courtyard hums with evening life. Guards trade stories. A hound bays in the distance, and the castle looms behind you, both majestic and vulnerable. You descend back into the town, silver clinking at your side, pride warring with fatigue. Tomorrow will bring fresh rivals, whispers of jealousy from other catchers who resent your sudden prestige. For now, though, you let the cool air guide you back into the alleys, where the rats still rule, and your tools await another long night. And if you've stayed with me this far, listening to footsteps echo through noble halls and traps snapping in shadowed pantries, maybe take a moment to like and subscribe. It helps me keep telling these long, sleepy stories, even when they smell faintly of flour, smoke, and rats. The castle summons had barely faded into memory before the first mutterings reached your ears. Whispers in the alleys, sidelong glances at the market, even the butcher's apprentice smirking as he hefted a cleaver, all spoke of rivals. Other rat catchers had taken notice. They had watched you stride through the gates of the castle, silver coins tucked discreetly into your pouch, and they were not pleased. Tonight, you would discover that in a town thick with rats, the humans could be just as territorial. You carry your sack of tools with a little more caution now, glancing over your shoulder as you move through the streets. The cobblestones glisten from a recent rain, and the lanterns swinging overhead drip faintly. The shadows seem fuller than before, every alley a stage for watchful eyes. It doesn't take long for one of them to emerge. A man steps out from behind a barrel, wiry and hunched, his face half hidden by a ragged hood. He smirks, tapping a crooked stick against his palm. "Castle coin, eh? That's a bold leap for someone still smelling of the sewers." His voice is rough, edged with envy. You nod politely, trying not to escalate, but already a second figure joins him, this one broad-shouldered, carrying a sack that jingles faintly with captured vermin. Clearly, you are being measured, weighed, perhaps even tested. Historians still argue whether medieval trades like rat catching were governed by formal guild rules or looser agreements. Some towns had guilds that protected territories, while others allowed free-for-all competition. What is certain is that rivalry often turned bitter, and methods could be as underhanded as they were practical. Tonight, you're learning firsthand that catching rats is only part of the battle. Catching respect is another. The wiry man boasts of his secret powders that will clear an alley in a single night. The broad fellow claims to own a breed of ferrets that can sniff out rats faster than any trap. You glance at your humble kit, pots, wires, powder pouches, and feel suddenly underdressed at this strange contest. But then you remember yesterday's pantry, the steward's nod, the silver in your purse. Perhaps results speak louder than boasts. You move on, setting traps in a new lane, while the rivals linger to watch. They mutter, they chuckle, when your first pot tips over empty. But patience pays. Soon, the telltale squeak echoes, and your sack quivers with a fresh capture. The broad fellow scowls, muttering that luck favors fools. You bow slightly, pretending at grace, though inside you're shaking with relief. Here's your quirky tidbit for the evening. Some medieval rat catchers guarded their recipes for poison so fiercely that they were rumored to pass them only to chosen apprentices on their deathbeds. These secrets were treated almost like alchemy, whispered formulas of herbs, ashes, and minerals. Your rivals no doubt carry their own, jealously guarded, though whether they truly work or simply reassure clients is anyone's guess. As the night deepens, the rivalry sharpens. One of the men begins setting traps dangerously close to yours, as though claiming the same territory. You shift slightly, eyeing him with raised brows, and he shrugs, muttering that there's room enough for everyone. You're not so sure. The alley feels tense, heavy with unspoken challenge. It is then that you hear laughter from above. Looking up, you spot townsfolk leaning from windows, watching the spectacle of 3 grown adults squabbling over rats. To them, it is entertainment, perhaps even more amusing than the jester at last year's fair. You shake your head, realizing that in this game, you must not only catch rats, but also win the audience. So, with a theatrical flourish, you lift your staff and strike at a bold rat, scurrying across the open stones. The blow lands true, and you raise the limp body high. The crowd above cheers, applauding as though you've slain a dragon. Your rivals scowl, their boasts silenced. For now. Historians still argue whether such rivalries fostered innovation or merely wasted energy. Did competition drive catchers to improve their methods, or did it simply lead to petty squabbles and sabotage? The truth likely lies somewhere between. But tonight, you feel the weight of both. The wiry man finally spits into the gutter, muttering that you'll learn your place soon enough, before vanishing into the shadows. The broad fellow lingers a moment longer, then shoulders his sack and stomps off, leaving you alone in the damp alley. The tension ebbs, replaced by exhaustion. You gather your traps, shake out the dust, and sling your growing sack of rats over your shoulder. The crowd above has dispersed, shutters closing, laughter fading into the night. You stand for a moment, alone again, listening to the rain drip from the eaves. You know the rivalry isn't over. This town may have endless rats, but the humans who hunt them are fewer, and each jealously guards his share of coin. Tomorrow, you may face sabotage, stolen traps, or worse. Yet for now, you've held your ground. The castle coin still clinks in your purse. Your traps have proven themselves once more, and you walk away not just with captured rats, but with something rarer, a sliver of respect. The road ahead is far from smooth, but you are learning that every alley, every tavern, every sewer, and every rival is part of this strange, exhausting dance. You step into the broader street, lantern in hand, and let the night wind cool your face. The town feels quieter, though the scurrying never ceases. Somewhere, your rivals are plotting, sharpening their sticks, whispering their formulas. Somewhere, the townsfolk are muttering of omens, disease, and shadows. And somewhere, a steward in a castle still remembers the night the rat catcher delivered peace to a pantry. You, caught between these worlds, continue forward, staff tapping gently against the stones, cloak heavy, but spirit steady. If you've walked with me through this strange rivalry, through envy and applause, maybe give the video a like and subscribe. It keeps these long, sleepy wanderings alive, even when the shadows are crowded with more rivals than rats. The morning arrives with damp fog curling around the rooftops. And though your body aches from rivalry and restless sleep, you are summoned again. This time, not by a noble steward or a furious market vendor, but by a cluster of townsfolk who insist that you must try something different, something beyond traps and staffs. They want remedies, charms, and concoctions to chase the vermin away. You sigh inwardly, for this is the realm of strange experiments and whispered cures, where superstition and desperation blur. Still, you gather your kit, knowing that in this job, you must humor as much as hunt. You trudge toward the square where a small crowd waits. An old woman steps forward, pressing into your hand a stub of waxy material that smells faintly rancid. She insists it is a candle made from cat fat, guaranteed to repel rats if burned near grain. You eye it warily, the greasy substance unpleasant in your palm. Yet you thank her politely, tucking it into your pouch. Historians still argue whether such remedies had any effect at all, or if they were purely symbolic gestures to reassure frightened households. Nearby, a bearded apothecary offers you another curious item, a pouch of powdered herbs, mint, tansy, and rue, said to drive rats away with their sharp scent. He leans in, whispering that the formula came from distant lands, perhaps even the East, though you suspect the claim is more marketing than truth. Still, you pocket the herbs, knowing that even the illusion of protection might please your clients. As you wander, more remedies surface. A farmer insists you should smear pitch along thresholds, trapping rats in sticky death. A seamstress swears that if you whisper charms into holes at midnight, the rats will depart. Someone even mutters about drowning a rat in ale and hanging its carcass in the rafters to ward off the rest. The ideas pile higher than the refuse in the alleys. You smile faintly, realizing your role tonight is not only to set traps, but to embody faith, however misplaced. Here is your mainstream historical fact for this stretch. Medieval Europe often blurred the line between medicine and magic, particularly when dealing with pests and disease. Herbal remedies were intertwined with charms, prayers, and symbolic acts. People trusted what comforted them, even if evidence was scarce. You, the rat catcher, are pulled into that mixture, expected to wield both stick and superstition with equal authority. By midday, you put the theories to the test. You light the greasy cat fat candle near a baker's sack, the wax sputtering, releasing a sour odor that makes you wrinkle your nose. You sprinkle herbs at the doorway, creating a fragrant line. You mutter a charm, half joking, half serious, repeating the words given by the seamstress. Then you wait. The first rat appears, bold as ever, sniffing at the herbs before darting straight across the line. The candle flickers, but the rat seems undeterred, snatching a crumb and vanishing. You shake your head, amused, though the baker gasps as though a ghost has passed. He insists it must be working, for surely more would have come otherwise. You smile, deciding not to argue. If belief is half the battle, then perhaps the candle has served its purpose after all. Later, at a farmhouse on the outskirts, you smear pitch along a doorway, the tar sticky and black. Within minutes, a rat ventures too close, its paws trapped in the goo. It squeals, thrashes, and falls still. The farmer nods with grim satisfaction, declaring the method foolproof. Yet you notice the rats behind it already probing another gap in the wall. The battle is endless, no matter the charm. Your quirky tidbit here. In some regions, people believed that carrying the dried paw of a mole could protect against rats, as if vermin feared the scent of a rival burrower. You chuckle softly, imagining yourself striding through the alleys holding aloft a shriveled mole paw like some holy relic. Perhaps tomorrow someone will press one into your hands. The day drifts by in smoke, herbs, and muttered spells. You watch rats dart across fragrant lines, ignore whispered words, and gnaw at grain no matter what strange defenses are set. Still, the townsfolk seem comforted, convinced their efforts will tip the balance. Historians still argue whether such superstitions hindered real progress against infestations or simply bought time until more practical solutions could be devised. As for you, tonight, they buy you coin and goodwill, and that is enough. In the evening, you sit by a hearth, the cat-fat candle flickering low. The air is heavy with the scent of herbs, smoke curling lazily. You sip a mug of watered ale offered by the grateful baker, who insists the candle must be working because his sacks remain untouched, though you know it is more likely chance and your earlier traps. You do not correct him. Instead, you smile, let him hold his comfort, and tuck the silver coin into your pouch. As night deepens, you walk home through the misty streets, sack heavy with the day's captures, cloak scented of mint and soot. You feel wearier than usual, not from the weight of rats, but from the strange burden of belief. People ask you to slay vermin, yes, but also to soothe their fears with charms and whispers. You realize that the role of rat catcher is more than practical. It is symbolic, a guardian against the unseen, the gnawing, the restless shadows. The moon hangs pale above, casting silver light over the rooftops. The town is quieter now, though in every crevice you know whiskers twitch and claws scrape. Tomorrow, the church will call you, demanding your skills in places where faith and fear collide even more sharply. Tonight, though, you walk slowly, letting the cool air wash away the scent of smoke and herbs, the faint laughter of rivals echoing behind you. If you've stayed with me through these strange remedies, half practical, half absurd, maybe give the video a like and subscribe. It helps me keep weaving these long, sleepy paths, even when they smell faintly of pitch, herbs, and cat fat. The next call does not come from market or tavern, nor even from some rival hoping to test you, but from the church. At first, you almost laugh when a nervous boy in a patched surplice tugs at your sleeve and says the priest wants the rat catcher. But as you follow him through winding streets toward the bell tower that looms above the town, you begin to realize that faith and vermin intersect in strange ways. The bells toll, solemn and heavy, as though reminding you of the seriousness of this summons. You step into the nave, the air cooler, tinged with incense and candle wax. Light filters through narrow windows, dust motes drifting in golden shafts. Parishioners kneel in prayer, whispering hymns, and yet at the far end of the hall, you hear the unmistakable scratch and scuffle of small claws. It seems even sacred ground offers no refuge from gnawing teeth. Historians still argue whether medieval churches truly succeeded in keeping grain and holy stores secure, or if rats simply proved indifferent to sanctity. Judging from the priest's expression as he strides toward you, the latter is closer to truth. He explains with great agitation that the church's granary, used to store tithes of wheat for the poor, has been invaded. Rats chew through sacks, scattering precious grain across the floor. Worse, some parishioners mutter that this is a sign, an omen of sin within the community. The priest scowls at such talk, but his eyes betray unease. He orders you to cleanse the place, to rid it of the pestilence before word spreads further. You nod, suppressing the urge to remark that rats don't care for theology. The granary lies through a side door, its heavy lock creaking open to reveal rows of sacks stacked against stone walls. The scent of wheat fills your nostrils, almost sweet, but quickly soured by the acrid stink of droppings. You kneel, lantern casting low light, and see tiny black bodies darting away at your approach. You hear their teeth gnashing on husks, bold enough to linger even as you shuffle closer. You set your traps carefully along the aisles, pots balanced with sticks, wire nooses at the gaps between sacks, powder scattered like a charm. You mutter to yourself, a little joke that you've become part priest, part alchemist, part janitor. The truth isn't far off. People here expect you to banish not just rodents, but also their fear of divine displeasure. Here is your mainstream historical fact for the section. Many medieval churches collected grain tithes, storing them in attached barns or granaries to feed the poor during lean months. Protecting these stores was crucial, for spoiled or wasted grain could mean hunger and unrest. A rat infestation, therefore, was not merely a nuisance, but a direct threat to charity and stability. You crouch silently as the first whiskered nose emerges. A rat creeps forward, drawn by the crumbs you placed. The pot tips and falls, a muffled squeak contained within. Success, though hardly triumph. Another follows, and this time your staff comes down quickly, echoing against stone. The sound startles you, though the priest at the doorway nods approvingly, murmuring something about righteous judgment. But then comes the quirky tidbit, one whispered by an elderly sacristan who peers nervously into the granary. He claims that in years past, the church employed not just catchers, but also ceremonies. Exorcisms directed at rats, complete with holy water, and chants commanding them to depart. Some even spoke of putting vermin on trial, sentencing them to exile from the parish. You raise your eyebrows at the thought, half amused, half unsettled. Imagine rats lined up in tiny chains, awaiting judgment at the altar. You continue your work, sweat trickling down your neck. The priest paces, muttering prayers, occasionally flinching at a squeak. He clearly hopes your traps will silence not only the noise, but also the rumors spreading among townsfolk. Historians still argue whether superstition such as rat trials was widespread or confined to a few eccentric corners of Europe. Either way, tonight you feel the weight of both superstition and expectation pressing against your shoulders. As dusk deepens, the granary grows quieter. Your traps rattle with a few captures, and your sack gains weight. You know the battle is far from over. The walls still echo with hidden claws. But for tonight, you have made a dent. The priest sighs in relief, pressing a small pouch of coin into your hand. He thanks you stiffly, though his eyes still linger on the shadows, as if half expecting the vermin to mock him with their return. You step back into the nave, where candles flicker and parishioners still pray. They glance at you curiously, whispering as you pass. Perhaps they see you as savior, perhaps as a reminder of infestation. Either way, your role has extended beyond mere catcher. You have become, for this night, a figure of reassurance in a sacred place. You leave the church behind, the bells tolling softly as you walk into the cooling air. The sky is a tapestry of fading purple and deepening blue, stars pricking through like distant watchfires. You pause, leaning on your staff, and reflect on the strangeness of your trade. Yesterday, you competed with rivals in grimy alleys. Today, You set traps beneath holy rafters. Tomorrow? Perhaps a farm, perhaps a fair, perhaps the endless sewers once again. Your boots carry you slowly homeward, sack heavy, coin pouch slightly fatter, spirit oddly subdued. You think of the sacristan's tales, of rats tried like criminals, and wonder whether the world makes more sense when vermin can be sentenced with words instead of sticks. But then a squeak from a gutter interrupts your musings, reminding you that rats care little for sermons. They only care for food, for shadow, for survival. In that, perhaps, they are not so different from you. If you're still here, drifting with me, through sacred halls and squeaking shadows, maybe take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It helps me keep telling these long, meandering tales, even when the echoes come from granaries that sound suspiciously like chapels full of mice. The summons comes at dawn, while the sky is still tinged with pale gray, and the town yawns itself awake. Today your steps take you not to the bustling square, nor to the echoing church, but beyond the gates, out toward the rolling farmland on the outskirts. Here, barns and byres stand weathered and leaning, their timbers dark with age, their air thick with the mingled scents of hay, animals, and the faint, sour tang of infestation. You trudge along the rutted path, staff tapping rhythmically, sack slung heavy across your back, cloak damp with dew. The fields stretch golden in the early light, but you know that within those barns lie battles, as grim as any fought in sewers or taverns. The farmer meets you at the gate, broad and sunburned, his hands calloused from years of toil. His expression is grim, his voice edged with frustration. He tells you that rats have been plundering his grain bins and harassing his chickens. Worse still, they've begun gnawing at harnesses and rope, threatening the tools that keep his farm alive. His wife stands nearby, arms folded, muttering about curses and ill omens. You nod respectfully, though you sense this day will test more than traps. It will test patience. You step into the barn, lantern raised, and immediately the smell hits you. Sweet hay, layered over the pungent odor of droppings. Dust floats in the shafts of light piercing through gaps in the wood. The floor creaks under your boots, and somewhere above, pigeons coo from the rafters. Yet beneath it all, the unmistakable sound persists. The scuffle of tiny claws, the rustle of creatures burrowing through straw. Here is your mainstream historical fact. Farms in medieval Europe were constant targets for rats, drawn to stores of grain and fodder. Barns provided warmth, food, and shelter, perfect conditions for thriving colonies. A single infestation could ruin a family's livelihood, making pest control as crucial in the countryside as in the town. You kneel near a grain bin, running your fingers over the gnawed wood. Small teeth marks etch patterns into the surface like crude runes. You set a clay pot trap by the opening, baited with grain dust, and sprinkle a line of powder nearby. The farmer watches skeptically, arms crossed, clearly wondering whether such humble tools can outwit his cunning foes. Movement catches your eye. A rat darts boldly across the floor, weaving between chickens that squawk in irritation. You lunge, staff raised, and with a quick strike, drive it into the straw. The farmer cheers, though his wife only shakes her head, muttering about omens again. You grin faintly, already sweating in the dusty air, and reset your stance. The hours wear on. You prowl the barn's corners, setting nooses in narrow gaps, scattering herbs where the smell of droppings is strongest. The animals eye you warily, cows chewing cud with slow judgment, chickens pecking near your boots, a goat bleating indignantly at your presence. You whisper a joke under your breath that perhaps the goat will take your job soon enough. Your quirky tidbit for this stretch. Some farmers believed that placing the skull of a cat in the barn would ward off vermin. The logic was simple. If rats feared living cats, they might also fear the relics of the dead. You spot no skulls here, though the farmer's wife mutters about trying such measures if your traps fail. You nod politely, suppressing the urge to laugh. By midday, sweat drips down your brow, soaking your collar. The sun beats against the roof, turning the barn into an oven. Rats scurry endlessly, bold in their numbers. Yet you manage a few captures. A pot rattles with life. A noose tightens around a whiskered neck. Your staff thuds against straw again and again. Each success earns you a grunt of approval from the farmer, though his wife remains unimpressed. You remind yourself silently that some battles you cannot outwin. Historians still argue whether rat infestations directly caused widespread rural famines or merely worsened them. The debate lingers in dusty chronicles, but for the farmer before you, there is no debate. Every rat he sees is one less loaf for winter. You understand his urgency, even if your own role feels small against such relentless foes. The afternoon drags on, punctuated by squeaks, clattering traps, and the lowing of cows. You pause once to sip water from a ladle, the taste metallic, but refreshing. You lean against the grain bin, letting your arms rest, listening to the rustling chorus that never quite stops. The farmer talks of wolves stealing sheep, of poor harvests, of his fear that the rats herald worse to come. You nod, knowing that in his world, everything is a sign. As the sun dips lower, you gather your traps. A few rats lie stiff in the straw. Others squirm in the sack slung across your back. It is not the glorious purge the farmer hoped for, but it is progress. He presses a small pouch of grain into your hands as payment, apologizing for his thin purse. You accept with gratitude, knowing grain can be as valuable as coin. His wife mutters that curses cannot be caught with sticks and pots, but you bow politely all the same. You step out into the cool evening air, the fields glowing gold in the last light. The barn stands behind you, quieter for now, though you know the battle will resume with the next sunrise. You trudge along the road back toward the town, sack heavier, shoulders aching, but spirit steady. Today has reminded you that rats are not just an urban plague, but a rural one too, gnawing at both city streets and country barns alike. The stars prick through the twilight as you near the gates. You pause a moment, leaning on your staff, watching the horizon darken. The town looms ahead, restless and alive, its alleys and markets waiting for you again tomorrow. Tonight, though, you carry with you the scent of hay, the echo of bleating goats, and the faint laughter of children who pointed at you as you passed. You smile wearily, knowing your role stretches across all corners of life, from noble castles to humble farms. And if you followed me through barns and byres, chickens and curses, maybe give the video a like and subscribe. It helps me keep spinning out these long, sleepy tales, even when the goats threaten to take my place. The following morning, you rise later than usual, body heavy from work in barns and byres. Yet the summons still comes. A neighbor, wide-eyed with gossip, insists that you should linger in the market square, not for rats alone, but for news. For tonight, the town is buzzing with stories. Whispers float from stall to stall, weaving like smoke, and many of them point directly to the creatures you chase. You sling your kit over your shoulder, curious more than cautious, and step into the square to listen. The air is alive with chatter. Merchants unload their goods. Children dart between stalls. And above it all comes the constant hum of rumor. People link rats not just with spoiled grain, but with disease, curses, even witches. You walk slowly, ears tuned, noting how fear magnifies every scurrying whisker. Historians still argue whether townsfolk truly understood the connection between rats and plague, or if they blamed the creatures only in hindsight. In this moment, though, you hear certainty in their voices. The rats are harbingers of sickness. You pause near a fishmonger, who mutters darkly to his neighbor. He insists that rats gnawing at his stall herald misfortune, that last time he saw such bold infestations, half the town fell ill. His neighbor counters, saying it is not the rats themselves, but witches who send them as familiars. He gestures toward a hunched woman sweeping nearby, muttering that she must have control over the vermin. You feel the tension ripple, realizing how quickly suspicion can leap from rat to human. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In many medieval towns, outbreaks of plague or other illnesses were often blamed on divine punishment. But vermin became part of the narrative too. Rats, with their relentless presence, served as visible scapegoats for invisible threats. That fear lingers in every whisper you hear today. A baker leans over his stall, lowering his voice to share a tale. He swears he saw rats leaving a house the night before a fever struck the family inside. To him, the connection is plain. The creatures sense illness and flee before it spreads. You nod politely, though inside you wonder whether the rats simply follow food and warmth. Still, you record the superstition in your mind, another thread in this tapestry of rumor. Your quirky tidbit comes from a passing shepherd who insists that rats, if boiled and eaten, can cure certain fevers. The idea makes your stomach churn, yet he speaks with conviction, certain of its truth. You thank him, though silently you hope never to see such a remedy attempted. The very thought feels like a cruel jest from history's stranger pages. You linger near a group of townsfolk gathered under an awning, their talk turning more urgent. One man insists the rats are drawn by the town's sins, that every squeak is a reminder of moral decay. A woman interrupts, saying the problem is simpler. Poor sanitation, too much waste, too many careless hands, tossing scraps into alleys. Their debate grows heated, and you find yourself caught in the middle. Historians still argue whether medieval awareness of sanitation was truly limited, or whether people understood more than the records suggest. Listening here, you hear both sides, moral explanations mingling with practical complaints. As the day stretches on, the gossip grows bolder. A tavern regular corners you, breath reeking of ale even in daylight, insisting that witches ride the backs of rats at night, slipping into homes unseen. He demands you confirm it. You chuckle softly, shaking your head, deflecting with a joke about rats being too stubborn to carry passengers. The man laughs, soothed, though you sense his question was half serious. Fear, after all, makes any story believable. Your work this day is light, only a few traps set, a handful of captures rattling in your sack. Yet the true labor lies in listening, in understanding the way rats are woven into the town's imagination. You realize that to catch rats is also to catch stories, to untangle the threads of fear that bind vermin to witches, omens, and illness. Each tale you hear is another layer to your role, another weight on your weary shoulders. As twilight falls, the market quiets. Stalls are shuttered, gossip fades, but the whispers remain in your ears. You walk back through the alleys, cloak drawn tight, reflecting on the strangeness of it all. Rats are small, common, almost mundane, and yet they loom in people's minds like specters, blamed for sickness, linked to witchcraft, cast as messengers of doom. You wonder whether centuries from now, historians will laugh at these tales or pity the fear that shaped them. The moon rises, pale and steady, casting long shadows across the cobblestones. You pause, listening to the scurry of claws in the darkness. Perhaps the whispers are wrong. Perhaps they are half right. Either way, you know that tomorrow you must keep hunting, keep setting traps, keep balancing truth and superstition in equal measure. Tonight, though, you let the cool air calm you, the distant bells lull you, and the endless chatter of rumor fade into the hum of sleep. And if you've listened to these strange tales, where rats become omens and witches allies, maybe give the video a like and subscribe. It helps me keep sharing these long, sleepy stories, even when the whispers are louder than the squeaks. The town sleeps poorly, and so do you. The night belongs to the rats, and tonight your duty is to patrol the lanes beneath the pale light of the moon. You sling your sack over your shoulder, lantern swinging gently, and step into streets emptied of merchants and chatter. Doors are bolted, shutters drawn, but the alleys remain alive with rustles and shadows. Each sound is magnified in the silence, the creak of wood, the drip of water, the sudden scratch of claws that echoes like laughter. This is your night watch, where every corner hides movement and every shadow taunts you. The cobblestones glisten faintly, kissed by dew, and the moonlight paints the roofs silver. You move slowly, staff in hand, ears tuned to the faintest squeak. Historians still argue whether medieval towns maintained any organized patrols against pests, or whether individuals like you shouldered the responsibility alone. From the stillness of these lanes, it seems clear enough. Tonight, you walk alone, guardian of streets that others fear to tread. You pause beneath a crooked sign swinging outside a tavern. Its paint is faded, its hinges squeal, but the building slumbers now, patrons snoring within. At its base, crumbs scatter like a trail, and sure enough, a rat scuttles from one shadow to another, pausing to sniff. You lower your lantern, watching its glinting eyes, then nudge a noose into place. The loop tightens quickly, and you lift the squirming body into your sack. One down, though countless remain. As you walk further, the silence presses in. You pass by a narrow lane where laundry still hangs limp, forgotten overnight. A rustle draws your gaze upward, and there you see them, rats crawling along the sagging line, balancing like acrobats. You can't help but chuckle quietly. You whisper to yourself that perhaps they deserve applause for agility. Humor, after all, keeps the fear at bay. Here is your quirky tidbit. Some medieval folk believed rats could vanish into thin air, slipping between this world and another like spirits. To explain their sudden appearance and disappearance, people imagined them as creatures half mortal, half supernatural. Watching the shadows tonight, you almost understand. A rat darts into a hole in the wall, and when you peer inside, there is nothing, only silence and dust. The lantern light flickers as the oil burns low. You pause to adjust it, and in that moment, a flurry of movement surrounds you. Several rats scatter at once, their claws clattering on stone, tails whipping. You swing your staff reflexively, striking one, missing another, laughing softly at your own clumsy ballet. The echo lingers, bouncing from wall to wall, and you wonder if the townsfolk dream of thunder, when in truth it is just you, fumbling with wood against shadows. Mainstream fact to ground you: medieval towns at night were often eerily quiet, with most residents indoors for safety. Without street lamps, only lanterns or the moon-guided steps. That stillness made every intrusion more striking, whether a thief, a stray dog, or a rat. Tonight, the silence is broken only by your own breathing and the endless scurry of vermin. You turn a corner into a wider lane where barrels are stacked against a wall. The smell of ale drifts faintly, and you know this is a banquet for the night's prowlers. You set 2 pots carefully, sprinkling crumbs to lure them, and crouch low. Within minutes, a whiskered face emerges, then another, greed overwhelming caution. The first pot falls with a satisfying clatter, and you grin faintly, sliding it into your sack. The second teeters, then drops. Another victory, tucked away. You shake your head at their boldness, muttering that perhaps they grow careless in moonlight. Further on, near the town wall, you pause to rest. The night is colder here, wind slipping through the cracks. You lean on your staff, staring at the stars. Somewhere beyond, caravans roll along distant roads, and villages sleep under quieter skies. Yet here you remain, chasing squeaks through stone passages. You reflect briefly that your role feels both grand and absurd. Guardian of streets, slayer of vermin, entertainer of gossip. Historians still argue whether rat catchers were respected or ridiculed. You feel both, depending on the hour. A sudden sound draws you from your thoughts, the faint wail of a child in a nearby house. You glance up at the shuttered window, imagining a mother rocking the little one back to sleep. The rats skitter along the eaves above, unbothered by human worry. You tighten your cloak, reminded that your work protects more than food. It guards peace of mind. The night stretches long, your steps slower, your sack heavier. You pass by the churchyard, its gravestones pale in moonlight. There, too, the rats scurry, slipping between stones, vanishing into burrows. The thought unsettles you briefly. Do they feast even here, among the dead? You shake the image away, though it lingers like a shadow in the back of your mind. By the time the first blush of dawn paints the horizon, you are weary. Your lantern has burned low, sputtering its last. Your staff is slick with dew, your cloak damp, your boots sore. Yet your sack is heavy with captures, your work not wasted. The town begins to stir, roosters crow, doors creak open, smoke rises from chimneys. You walk back toward your lodging, blending into the waking hum, though your eyes still scan every corner for a final flicker of whiskers. You pause once more at the edge of the square, watching merchants set up their stalls, none of them knowing how many rats you chased through the night. Perhaps they will never know, and perhaps that is the way of things. Your role is quiet, often thankless, yet necessary. You sigh, adjusting the strap on your shoulder, and step inside as the day begins anew. And if you're still with me, wandering these silent streets, perhaps tap like and subscribe. It helps keep these long, sleepy stories alive, even when the only company is a sack of squeaks beneath the moon. Tonight, fortune twists in an unexpected way. After so many nights walking alleys, creeping through barns, and fumbling in sewers, you stumble across something different. A pair of glowing eyes watching you from beneath a broken cart. At first, you tense, expecting another bold rat. But then the shape shifts, graceful and deliberate. A cat steps forward, tail flicking, whiskers quivering. Its fur is ragged in places, its ears torn from old fights, yet its gaze is sharp, its presence commanding. You realize you've found an ally, perhaps unreliable, perhaps mercurial, but an ally nonetheless. The cat studies you with silent suspicion, as though weighing whether you are worthy of assistance. You crouch, offering a crust of bread, which it ignores. Instead, it pads forward to the sack at your side, sniffing the faint rattles within. A low growl escapes, and with sudden speed it bats the sack, startling you. You laugh softly, realizing the cat wants not bread, but quarry. Rats, after all, are its true currency. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Cats were both revered and distrusted in medieval Europe. In many towns, they were valued as vermin hunters. Yet in certain times and places, they were associated with witchcraft and burned or driven away. This contradictory status made their role uncertain, though practical folk often kept them regardless. Tonight, your ragged stray embodies both sides, savior of granaries, whisper of superstition. You rise and continue your patrol, and the cat follows at a distance. Its paws move noiselessly, its eyes gleam in the moonlight. You joke to yourself that perhaps you've gained an apprentice, one less likely to complain than the rival catchers in town. The humor steadies you as you set a trap near a pile of discarded grain sacks. The cat slinks close, body low, tail twitching. A rat emerges, bold and swift, and before your trap can fall, the cat pounces. A squeak, a snap of jaws, and silence. The cat turns back to you, triumphant, as though demanding recognition. You bow theatrically, whispering thanks. Your quirky tidbit for this stretch. Some chronicles tell of cats trained to accompany rat catchers, slipping into holes and dragging vermin back like miniature hounds. Whether truth or embellishment, the thought makes you smile as the stray pads beside you. Perhaps tonight you live out that rumor, one rat at a time. The night deepens. You pass through lanes where shutters creak open and townsfolk peer nervously. One woman gasps at the sight of the cat, muttering about witches. She slams her window shut, the word hanging in the air like a curse. Historians still argue whether the association of cats with witchcraft was born from fear of their nocturnal habits or from deeper superstitions. Whatever the cause, tonight you feel the weight of it. The cat, indifferent, merely licks its paw. You set another pot near a butcher's stall, baited with scraps. The cat waits in the shadows, muscles coiled. When a rat creeps forward, it darts, quicker than your eye can follow. The trap falls a moment later, capturing nothing, for the cat already has its prize. You chuckle softly, realizing that perhaps you are now the apprentice, your tools clumsy beside such instinct. As you move through the square, the cat remains close, weaving between your steps. Once, it leaps onto a barrel, balancing as it surveys the street like a sentry. Another time, it disappears into a dark hole, only to emerge moments later with a twitching tail clamped in its jaws. You marvel at its skill, wondering how many more rats slip past your traps unseen. The night stretches long, but for once you feel less alone. The cat's silent presence eases the weight of shadows, the endless squeaks less daunting with a companion at your side. You even imagine telling the steward at the castle that you've hired an assistant, though you suspect he would frown at such insolence. Still, the thought makes you smile as you adjust your sack, now heavier with captures earned by paw as much as by trap. At last, as dawn's first light brushes the rooftops, the cat pauses at the edge of the alley. It sits, tail curled around its paws, watching you with unblinking eyes. Then, without ceremony, it turns and slips into the shadows, vanishing as silently as it appeared. You stand there a moment, oddly bereft, before chuckling at yourself. Companions in this world are fleeting. Yet for one night, you shared the hunt, and the memory lingers. You trudge back toward your lodging, sack rattling, cloak damp with morning mist. Your thoughts drift between superstition and gratitude, between whispers of witches and the simple truth of hunger and instinct. Perhaps tomorrow the cat will return, perhaps not. Either way, you carry forward, staff tapping against stone, ears still tuned to the endless chorus of claws. And if you've stayed with me through this strange companionship, maybe give the video a like and subscribe. It helps me keep telling these long, sleepy tales, even when the cats are quicker at catching rats than I ever will be. The town stirs with unease as you step into the square once more, cloak heavy with the damp of early morning. Rumors fly faster than sparrows. A magistrate's pantry has been overrun, and tongues wag that the culprit must be none other than you. Not for failing to catch enough rats, but for stirring them into rebellion. You laugh softly at the absurdity, though a chill creeps down your spine. In this trade, one slip, one gnawed sack too many, and the townsfolk will turn blame as sharply as a knife. You are summoned by 2 guards, their halberds clanging against their armor as they escort you to the magistrate's hall. The building looms taller than most, its stone facade streaked with soot, its door heavy with iron bands. Inside, the air is rich with spice and parchment, a place where authority breathes through every corner. Yet beneath the fragrance of dried herbs, you smell it, the sour tang of infestation. You cannot help but smile at the irony. Even magistrates cannot decree away the rats. The steward leads you to the pantry. What you see there makes your stomach twist. Flour is scattered across the floor like snow, sacks torn open in jagged lines. Wooden shelves are gnawed, dried fruit half-eaten, crumbs scattered in chaotic trails. The magistrate himself, a round man with a flushed face, stands red with anger, declaring the entire town will suffer unless his food stores are saved. His voice trembles not only with rage, but also with fear. Historians still argue whether such officials truly believed vermin threatened their power, or whether they simply feared embarrassment before noble peers. Either way, tonight you must save face. For him, and by extension, for yourself. You kneel quickly, setting traps near the torn sacks, scattering powder in a hasty line. Your hands tremble slightly, for the magistrate watches your every move, his breath loud in the small chamber. You try to steady yourself with a joke whispered under your breath, muttering that perhaps the rat simply sought an invitation to his next feast. The magistrate scowls, unamused. You return to your work, lips pressed tight. Your quirky tidbit for this stretch. Some records tell of rat catchers who, when accused of failing their duties, swore elaborate oaths that rats were guided by supernatural powers beyond human control. Some even suggested the rodents were spies of enemies, slipping into pantries as saboteurs. Listening to the magistrate's fury tonight, you wonder whether such tales were invented to save one's own skin. Suddenly, movement erupts from the corner. Several rats dart across the open floor, bold in their hunger. The magistrate yelps, stumbling backward, nearly toppling a jar of honey. You swing your staff quickly, striking one, sending the others scattering. The blow echoes loudly, and for a moment the pantry feels like a battlefield. The magistrate clutching his chest while you crouch, steadying your breathing. Historians still argue whether individual rat catchers could ever truly control infestations, or whether their role was largely symbolic, someone to blame when grain spoiled, someone to praise when it did not. Tonight, with the magistrate glaring, you feel that truth keenly. You are less hunter than scapegoat, though you fight nonetheless. You reset the traps, sprinkle more powder, and soon hear the satisfying thud of a clay pot dropping. A muffled squeak follows, and you lift the captured rat, sack it quickly, and glance toward the magistrate. He exhales, relief softening his features, though suspicion lingers. Another squeal rises from a shelf, and the magistrate nearly bolts from the room. You strike again, catching one with your staff, while another slips into the shadows. The night drags long within those cramped walls. You prowl back and forth, chasing whiskers, resetting traps, muttering charms more for comfort than belief. The magistrate hovers, sweating, demanding updates every few minutes. You reassure him with half-truths, insisting progress is steady, though you know the pantry will never truly be free of vermin. Still, appearances matter more than reality here. If he believes his stores are safe, then perhaps your position will remain safe as well. At last, the pantry grows quiet. The sack at your side is heavier. Your arms ache. Your brow glistens with sweat. You straighten slowly, turning to face the magistrate. He eyes the sack, then the captured rats laid out as proof. His frown eases, and he nods curtly, pressing a coin pouch into your hand. Yet his words remain sharp. Fail again, and you will answer for it. You bow, murmuring your thanks, though inside you sigh with exhaustion. Leaving the hall, you step back into the cool night air. The town seems calmer now, though whispers still linger. You sense that rivals may have fueled these rumors, jealous of your castle summons, eager to see you stumble. The thought unsettles you, but you press it aside. Tonight, you have survived. You have faced not only rats, but the wrath of authority, and walked away with coin still in your purse. The moon glimmers above, pale and steady, as you trudge back through narrow streets. Shadows dart along the walls, reminding you that the battle never ends. Yet your steps are lighter for having endured the magistrate's glare. Tomorrow may bring another trial, another rumor, another flood of claws. But tonight you can rest, knowing you did not falter. If you've walked with me through this tense pantry, with sacks torn and tempers high, maybe take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It helps me keep telling these long, meandering tales, even when the magistrate himself threatens to have me tried for treason by bread and cheese. Morning light filters through banners strung across the square, for today is the seasonal fair. The town, usually gray with toil, blooms with color and noise. Merchants set up stalls draped in cloth. Jugglers toss pins into the air, and the scent of roasted meat drifts over cobbles, slick with spilled ale. Amid this festivity, your role might seem forgotten. But no fair escapes its shadows, and today you are called not to hide in alleys, but to step into the open, performing tricks with cages and rodents for coin and ridicule alike. You shuffle through the crowd, sack rattling faintly, staff tapping against the stones. Children point, whispering, tugging at their mother's sleeves. Some laugh, others wrinkle their noses. To them, you are not savior nor scapegoat, but spectacle. Another curiosity among tumblers and hawkers. You sigh, yet step forward, for coin is coin, and fairs are generous with their laughter. A stall owner beckons you, offering a patch of space near a juggler's stage. You set down your sack, drawing out traps, nooses, and a clay pot with theatrical care. A small crowd gathers, murmuring. You bow with exaggerated flourish, muttering that tonight's performance stars creatures more cunning than jugglers, more elusive than dancers. The crowd chuckles, half in amusement, half in disgust. Here is your mainstream historical fact. Seasonal fairs in medieval Europe were not only markets but celebrations, blending commerce with entertainment. Performers, craftsmen, and charlatans mingled freely, and even rat catchers sometimes turned their trade into display. By showing their skills, they gained patrons and coin, though often at the price of dignity. You draw out a rat from the sack, holding it aloft by the scruff. The crowd gasps, children squeal, and you grin faintly, bowing again. You place the creature into a small cage rigged with a tiny door, demonstrating how it scurries through, lured by crumbs. When the clay pot drops with a thud, the audience applauds, not for the rat's capture, but for the show itself. You pretend to bask in their admiration, though inside you feel the sting of mockery. Your quirky tidbit for this stretch. In some places, rat catchers were invited to fairs specifically to parade their captures, lining up cages as proof of their skill. Some even staged mock battles between rats and terriers, though tonight you keep your display gentler. You know well enough the fairgoers seek laughter, not horror. You continue, setting nooses along a plank, guiding the rats through as though performing a dance. Each twitch, each squeak, draws gasps and laughter. One child claps wildly when a rat darts into a trap, while another hides behind her mother's skirts. You wink, pretending that the rats are trained actors, partners in this strange theater. The audience swells, tossing coins into a basket at your feet. Yet not all the laughter is kind. A group of young men jeer loudly, mocking your trade, calling you Lord of Shadows and Keeper of Fleas. Their words sting, though you force a grin. Historians still argue whether rat catchers were respected or ridiculed in such public spaces. Judging by tonight's fair, you are both entertainer and outcast. Useful, yet scorned. The afternoon wears on. The sun climbs higher, and sweat trickles down your back. The rats grow restless in their cages, squeaking loudly, adding to the chaos of jugglers, fiddlers, and hawkers. You exaggerate your movements, turning clumsy slips into comic gestures, earning more laughter and more coin. Children toss pebbles near the cages, daring the rats to scurry. You gently shoo them away, muttering under your breath that perhaps the rats deserve more dignity than their audience. A pause comes when an old woman pushes through the crowd, leaning on a cane. She eyes your display with sharp suspicion, muttering that parading rats invites curses. Some nod in agreement, whispering of ill omens. You bow respectfully, assuring her with mock solemnity that the rats are prisoners, not guests. The crowd laughs again, tension broken, and you continue. As dusk falls, torches flare, and the fair grows rowdier. Ele flows freely, music swells, and your role shifts once more. Instead of demonstrating traps, you simply display the wriggling sack, shaking it for effect. The crowd roars, some tossing coins, others tossing insults. You bow anyway, gathering what you can. By the time the last torch burns low, your basket holds enough silver and copper to outweigh the day's shame. Historians still argue whether such fairs elevated tradesmen or reduced them to spectacle. For you, the answer is clear enough. Tonight, you were performer first, catcher second. Yet the coin is real, and the rats remain caged, symbols of a struggle both serious and absurd. You shoulder your sack once more, weaving through the drunken throng, slipping past dancers and fiddlers until the town's quieter alleys welcome you back. The fair's noise lingers in your ears as you walk. The laughter, the jeers, the applause, they mingle into one hum, echoing against the cobbles. You feel tired, but not broken. Weary, but strangely satisfied. Tomorrow, the fair will fade, the banners taken down, the stalls dismantled. But tonight, You were both spectacle and survivor, mocked and paid in equal measure. The moon rises pale above the rooftops, and you pause to glance at it. Somewhere, rats still scurry unseen, indifferent to fares, laughter, or coin. You chuckle softly, adjusting the strap on your shoulder, and step into the shadows, ready for whatever strange stage tomorrow may bring. And if you followed me through this noisy fair, where ridicule and coin mix as freely as ale, maybe give the video a like and subscribe. It helps me keep sharing these long, sleepy stories, even when I end up as the entertainment rather than the hunter. The fair's noise fades into memory, leaving behind only the clink of coins in your pouch and the faint ache of mockery in your bones. The morning that follows feels different. The air is colder, the streets quieter, and even the rats seem subdued, as if the town itself knows your week of labor nears its end. You rise with the first light, shoulders sore, staff heavier than usual in your grip. This is the last day of reckoning, when you count not just rats and coin, but aches, smells, and the strange dignity of survival. You step out into the streets, and the familiar chorus greets you. Claws scurrying in gutters, merchants muttering about spoiled goods, children laughing as they point at your tattered cloak. Every sound feels sharper today, more final. Historians still argue whether rat catchers like you were truly necessary for the survival of towns or merely tolerated curiosities. You've lived the argument in flesh and sweat, and by now you know, whether respected or mocked, your presence filled a need, however imperfectly. Your first stop is the baker's stall, where you set traps days ago. He greets you with a half smile, offering a loaf crusted too hard for sale, but good enough to chew. You take it with gratitude, though your teeth complain as you bite. He remarks that he has seen fewer whiskers near his flour sacks, and whether truth or politeness, you accept the compliment. Your tally begins here. Not just rats caught, but trust earned in crumbs and smiles. The next visit is the tavern. The fiddler snores in his chair, ale spilled across the floor, but the tavern keeper waves you over, tossing you a coin with a grunt. He says no rats were seen near the hearth last night, though he suspects they linger in the cellar. You nod, too weary to descend into the musty dark again. For today, the tally is in your favor. Your body remembers the crouching, the staff strikes, the endless squeaks. You let the memory stand as proof enough. By midday, you trudge toward the sewers. The hatch looms, damp and forbidding, yet you force yourself to peer inside. The stench rises instantly, sour and suffocating, reminding you of the night you slogged through ankle-deep filth. You do not descend this time. Instead, you lean against the stone, staff across your knees, and count the cost. The rats down there remain countless, beyond traps, beyond powders, beyond staff strikes. Historians still argue whether the battle against vermin was ever winnable, or whether medieval towns simply endured, resigned to living alongside them. You sigh, admitting quietly that the argument leans toward the latter. Still, you remember the courage it took to face that dark, and that courage you add to your week's tally. As afternoon wanes, you pass through the castle gates once more, though no steward awaits you this time. Guards nod faintly, acknowledging your service, and you sense their relief that no new summons has been issued. You pause near the pantry door, recalling the magistrate's wrath, the steward's cold gaze, the traps snapping beneath banners of authority. In the silence of memory, you realize this too belongs in your reckoning, that even nobles and magistrates, for all their power, flinched at the squeak of a rat, And you, ragged and weary, stood between them and that fear. Your quirky tidbit for this day of reflection. In some chronicles, rat catchers were described as half magicians, half pariahs. Townsfolk imagined they carried charms, that they whispered to vermin, that they lived somewhere between man and beast. Tonight, you almost believe it yourself. After a week of crawling through straw, smoke, and sewage, you feel less human and more like the creatures you hunt. The town eyes you with curiosity, suspicion, and a touch of awe. That too belongs in your tally. You return to your lodging as twilight falls. The square hums softly, lanterns flickering, merchants packing up their wares. Children chase each other across the cobbles, their laughter rising above the scurry of rats darting from shadow to shadow. You sink onto a bench, setting your sack beside you, and begin to count. Not the rats inside. They squeak and rustle, evidence enough. But the pieces of yourself you've left behind, the bruises on your knees from crouching, the blisters on your hands from gripping the staff, the smell in your cloak that no amount of washing will erase. And then you count the coin. It clinks softly as you pour it into your palm. Some came from nobles, others from bakers, tavern keepers, farmers, even jeering fairgoers who tossed pennies into your basket for amusement. The total is meager compared to the effort, yet it shines in the dim light like proof that your week was not for nothing. Historians still argue whether such trades were sustainable livelihoods or desperate scraps for survival. You know your answer. It is both, depending on the day. You lean back, gazing up at the night sky. Stars prick through the darkness, steady and silent. The air is cooler now, carrying the faint scent of smoke and bread. The town exhales around you, settling into evening rhythms. Somewhere a fiddler plays, somewhere a dog barks, somewhere a rat squeaks defiantly. You close your eyes, letting the sounds wash over you. This week has been one of endless scurrying, of sewers and sacks, of jeers and coins. You have faced rivals who spat envy, priests who muttered prayers, farmers who muttered curses, magistrates who muttered threats. You have crawled through filth, crouched in taverns, prowled alleys by moonlight, and through it all, you have endured. That endurance is the final tally, the number that cannot be counted yet weighs heavier than any sack of rats. The reckoning of your last day is not in numbers, but in resilience. You have proven that survival is possible, if not glamorous. You have shown that even the smallest service, chasing vermin with clay pots and sticks, can steady a town's heart. You have walked the line between ridicule and respect, and though the line is thin, you did not fall. Night deepens, the square empties, and you gather your things. You rise slowly, staff creaking under your grip, sack rustling at your side. Tomorrow, perhaps, you will be summoned again, for rats never rest. But tonight marks the end of this week, the close of your reckoning. You walk toward the alley where shadows gather, footsteps steady, cloak trailing like a weary banner. And if you've stayed with me through this long week, through alleys, taverns, sewers, barns, fairs, and now this final reckoning, perhaps give the video a like and subscribe. It helps me keep spinning these sleepy, endless stories, even when the tally is more aches than coin. Your week as a medieval rat catcher draws to its close, and though the town still hums with whispers and claws, you feel the weight of reflection pressing heavier than the sack at your side. The alleys are familiar now, every corner mapped by memory, every shadow hiding a story. You walk slowly through the damp streets, the lantern in your hand flickering against stone walls streaked with age. 7 days have passed, each one dragging you through laughter, filth, rivalry, fear, and strange pride. Tonight, you let your thoughts settle like dust, reviewing what this peculiar trade has taught you. You remember the first day, stepping into alleys where rats outnumbered loaves, armed only with clay pots and powders. Then the market, where merchants eyed you with suspicion, and the tavern, where laughter rattled beams while you crouched beneath benches. You think of the sewers, foul and echoing, the castle pantry where nobles flinched at whiskers, the rivals lurking in shadows, boasting of secrets. You recall the strange remedies, candles of cat fat, charms whispered into holes, herbs sprinkled like magic. You recall the church granary, where priests muttered prayers and sacristans whispered of trials for vermin. You recall the farms, barns echoing with bleats, gossip in the market linking rats to plague and witches, moonlit patrols where silence magnified every scurry, the stray cat who became your ally, the magistrate's wrath when rats invaded his pantry, the jeers of the fair where you performed for coin, and finally, the reckoning, counting not only silver, but bruises, smells, and endurance. Historians still argue whether rat catchers mattered much in the grand scale of medieval survival. Some claim the trade was symbolic, a salve for townsfolk rather than a true solution. Others argue that even the smallest dent in vermin numbers preserved grain and steadied hungry bellies. The debate lingers in dusty texts, yet you have lived it in sweat, staff, and sleepless nights. You know the truth lies somewhere between. You cannot win against the tide of whiskers, but you can prove that someone dared to try. Your quirky tidbit for this final night surfaces from memory. In certain chronicles, rat catchers were said to bargain with vermin, leading them away with charms or music, a story that later inspired fables of Pied Pipers. You chuckle softly, imagining yourself with a flute instead of a staff, guiding a parade of squeaks out through the town gates. The image makes you grin despite the weariness. Now, as you stand at the edge of the square, lantern dimming, you feel both smaller and larger. Smaller because the rats remain. Endless, defiant. Larger because you faced them, if only for a week. The town has mocked you, paid you, blamed you, even cheered you. Each role you played left a mark, and now you carry them all. Your cloak is frayed, your boots caked with muck, your hands blistered, yet your spirit, oddly, feels steadier. You may not have banished vermin, but you have learned endurance, humility, and a strange sort of companionship, even if it came from a ragged cat. You turn down the final alley, sack rattling faintly. Behind you, the town settles into night. Ahead, only more shadows wait. You breathe slowly, letting the cool air wash through your lungs, the rhythm of your steps syncing with the eternal scurry beneath cobblestones. You wonder what history will make of such a life. Perhaps nothing. Perhaps a footnote in chronicles about pestilence, tucked between wars and kings. Or perhaps only silence, forgotten as surely as the squeaks vanish into walls. Yet tonight, you feel the quiet dignity of one who lived the debate, who held a staff against shadows, who endured. The week is done. You trudge forward, fading with the lantern's glow, one more figure swallowed by history's endless dusk. And now, as your journey fades, let the pace soften. Imagine the streets falling quiet, the last lanterns flickering low, the town finally resting. The sounds of markets, taverns, and sewers drift into memory, leaving only the hush of night. You breathe slowly, shoulders easing. each step lighter than the last. The week of scurrying shadows has ended, and the weight you carried begins to dissolve. The air is cooler now, carrying a faint breeze that smells not of smoke or filth, but of distant rain. Stars gleam above, steady and patient, reminding you of how small each worry feels beneath the sky. The scuffle of rats is gone, replaced by silence, a silence you can rest within. Your staff no longer feels heavy. Your cloak no longer clings. You are simply walking, calmly, into the stillness of night. Let your thoughts drift like dust settling on quiet beams. You need not tally coin or count bruises anymore. You need only breathe, slowly and steadily, letting your body sink into rest. The shadows grow softer, the alleys gentler, the world calmer. Even the echoes of laughter, gossip, and whispers fade, leaving behind only the rhythm of your own calm breath. You are safe now, free of the week's burdens, free of claw and filth. The town sleeps, and you may sleep too. Each breath carries you deeper into stillness, each heartbeat slower, each moment softer. The night holds you gently, like a lullaby written in stone and stars. Close your eyes, let the lantern's glow fade, and step quietly into rest.